If you're buying or thinking about renovating an older home in Lancaster, what you want to do is make sure that you're purchasing a property that isn't going to be a money pit. If you don't check things up front and set yourself a proper budget, you could really end up suffering on the back end. So in this video, I'm going to be going through the things you really need to think about before buying a renovation project, how to budget properly, and how to maximize your return on those improvements. How old is the home and what renovations have been done? Many homes in Lancaster were built before 1950 and plenty of them were built in the 1800s. This means you've got older homes with older mechanicals, older electrical, older plumbing, and a whole bunch of things that could potentially go wrong. Now, the first step before you purchase one of them is to get a really good understanding as to what's been updated and what is original. Some of the ways you can do this is go through the township website, see what permits have been pulled and what improvements have been made over the last number of years. You will also want to check the seller's disclosure to see what improvements they would have made throughout the ownership of the property. Even if you don't know much about construction, you can tell if a property has a relatively new kitchen or bathroom, so use your eyes and make sure you bring a spare set along with you. A home with updated systems but maybe needs a little bit of cosmetic work is going to be a very different story to one that's never been touched at all. What condition is the roof? So one of the biggest expenses you'll find on a property is going to be the roof. Some of these homes, they tend to have the rubber roofs or they have the slate shingle, and slate can last you 100, 150 years. But if it hasn't been looked after, hasn't been replaced, it could be one of those things that you're going to have to get a specialist out to fix. And if you have a large slate roof, this can be very expensive. Even things like the gutters, for example, I live in an 1880s home. Last year we got a leak and it came in through the bedroom wall. And essentially we had to get the kind of special internal gutters replaced. And this was about $4,000 or $5,000 for them to fix the gutter and replace the slates. Is the electrical system updated and safe? Electrical systems are one of the biggest red flags in older homes in Lancaster. A lot of the townhomes used to have knob and tube wiring, which A, is very difficult to get insurance on because it's much more expensive. B, the risk of fire is higher. And then C, it can cost you like $30,000 to $50,000 to rewire a home that is completely knob and tube. You also may find that the panel boxes, if they're older, don't have quite enough service. If you're looking at adding something like central air to your house and you only have a 100 amp panel, again, you're going to have to add in the cost of upgrading that to a 200 amp service before you'll be able to get that put in. Before renovating or before purchasing, make sure you have a good idea of the current ampage of your panel box and that you're even going to be able to get the property insured because of the different types of electrical. What type of plumbing does the home have? So a big one here, especially if you have like younger children, is that you want to make sure the property has the right type of plumbing. A lot of these old homes have galvanized steel, cast iron, or sometimes even lead pipes. Now, the township does do a really good job that if you think your property may have lead, they'll come out, do an inspection, and then they'll help you replace those pipes, usually on the township's money, because they need to make sure they're providing you with safe drinking water. When we moved into this property, there was a leak with the cast iron sewer stack. We had to have it removed, and it was about $3,500 to remove a small section from the kitchen and replace it with PVC, and then have someone come and fix up the drywall afterwards. Now, if you have a big sewer stack that's all old cast iron and it's starting to rust, this can run you upwards to probably $5,000 to $10,000 depending on you have to do it. So again, making sure that you have ideally updated plumbing if possible, and if not, that the current plumbing is in good condition or at least copper. How efficient is the heating and cooling system? Now, these old homes are beautiful and full of character. However, they don't tend to be the most efficient. If you have an older boiler or furnace, it can be far less efficient and far more expensive to heat. Especially in the winters in Pennsylvania, the gas bills can get pretty expensive in these townhomes. I think recently we had a very cold snap this January and my gas bill was around $550 just for January itself, and December wasn't much less than that. If you have a property that doesn't have HVAC, this can also be very expensive. But if you have a property that you're looking at purchasing, it already has the ductwork for maybe forced air, it's going to be far less expensive and far less kind of invasive and damaging to the property to purchase the home, swap the old furnace out for a new, more efficient furnace, and an HVAC unit. I recently had one quoted and it was around $9,000 for a furnace and an HVAC with an 80% efficiency boiler, but depending on the size of property, this could range widely. Are there structural or foundation concerns? Now, what I will say is the good news is that these homes have been standing, some of them for like 100 to 200 years. So is there a chance they could fall down? Yes, of course there is. However, what you want to look out for is when you get down into the basement, are there any large cracks? Are there any missing stones? If there are areas that you're able to put an entire hand into, or there's major bowing of the walls, you would definitely want to get a structural engineer out or someone to come and take a look to make sure it is structurally sound. However, a lot of these buildings, they've been standing for 100 years. They're probably still going to be standing in 100 years. You're just going to want to have to do your due diligence. What permit and zoning regulations apply to Lancaster City? Now, Lancaster City is fairly firm on their renovations and permitting. If you're looking at doing anything, pretty much, well, especially major stuff. So if you're doing roof, HVAC, any structural work, you're going to want to look at getting a permit pulled just to make sure that they can come out and reinspect the work. Similarly, for electrical and plumbing, if you're replacing knob and tube wiring, you're going to want to make sure it gets signed off by the city. For smaller things like painting and flooring, again, technically you should go and get yourself a permit. If you're in any doubt, what I would do is just call the township or send them an email and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this to our property. What type of permit do you recommend? How much is it going to be? And just pay it, and then you're going to be safe, basically. If you are thinking about considering an older property, there are a few more things you want to think about. You can check out this video to see what do I really need to know before purchasing a property. And in this video here, I'm going to give you a ballpark figure of what you can expect to spend when renovating an older home.